Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Clear Path Podcast. We're here with our annual power rankings, preseason power ranking episode. We're did the East a couple days ago, so now we're on to the West right before the NBA season kicks off. This is definitely the more interesting of the two conferences. Definitely, I would say the deeper of the two conferences. Feels like everything's to play for here. Feels like standings will really matter a lot, matchups and whatnot. So get into it, Nick.
Yeah. This is a very interesting one. I think for me at least, there's one clear number one, and then there's a couple of other teams who I could all look at and say they have a pretty big flaw that drops them down for me. And then you get into this kind of bunch in between, like, I don't know, 5 and 13 in the conference, where you're like, yeah, I guess I could see any of these teams making the playoffs and like winning a round or two, and any of them dropping out. So. It's pretty interesting. I also just want to make a note here that Max is in Europe, so I woke up before work to do this. So don't
Yeah,
ever
Nick is
say I'm not
definitely
dedicated to the Clear Path podcast.
Nick definitely is putting in a shift today. Yeah, it's a rosy 4 p.m. for me. So I've already done basically everything I wanted to do today.
In Paris, Max.
Yeah, a bit foreshadowing maybe for some of our rankings later on. All right, let's just get into it. I'd assume we have the same number one, but I will
Yeah.
say it wasn't as clear cut for me. I definitely had to think about every single position I made. So, I mean, number one for me, the Denver Nuggets.
Oh,
Oh, oh,
I had the Thunder. Okay.
oh, all right. Okay, here we go. Okay, I did consider the Thunder. Um, yeah, I definitely did consider the Thunder, but I think Jokic is too good, was what it came down to for me. I have the Thunder too, so they're not far away. I definitely considered them. Um, but yeah, it feels like to me he got a nice long um, Olympics, got to, play some European basketball. And then I feel like, Murray's going to be healthy. I just saw the extended Aaron Gordon. Like the only player they really lost was KCP, which is like, okay, Christian Braun probably can step up in that role. They still have Peyton Watson, got some pieces. But yeah, honestly, what it was, especially in the playoffs, I'd just much rather have Jokic than SGA. So that's what I thought.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I did have Denver too, so we weren't far off there. And where I got to with Denver was just thinking about how good they played the other teams. I mean, they really took, I mean, Minnesota, obviously took them to 7 games. They always played the Celtics really tough during the regular season too. So I still feel like they have that championship pedigree for sure. Where I got nervous was looking at Christian Brown as that fifth starter. Like, I know he's good, but to now have him like 36 minutes a game and relying on him when before it was like KCP, who's a little bit more suited to kind of be that fifth guy, made me a little nervous. And then honestly, the bench too. I don't really get the Westbrook thing. I don't think he's been super productive. I mean, obviously they're going to need him a little bit to, just create some offense when Jokic is off the court. But so yeah, ultimately I put him at two because I do respect the championship pedigree and having Jokic there. Even though Murray did have a pretty weird Olympics and kind of end to the season here. And I think honestly they just ran out of gas against Minnesota.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, that's how I
yeah,
felt
just
too.
from having such a long run. So, I'm not super far off from you, but I just thought the Thunder were a much more well-rounded team.
I think the Thunder are definitely deeper, but I still have some concerns about, I mean, the mantra that we sort of live by, like best player in each series. I just think I would need to see something big out of Chet maybe or Jalen Williams, the OSU guy, in order for me to really feel better about it. They added Hartenstein, which in theory is a really cool move, but then he immediately got hurt for like the first two
Yeah.
months of the season. So sort of like a moot point there. Like I feel like we've seen everything we could possibly see from Lou Dort. They added Caruso, which is fine, but in terms of like guarding Jokic, like they don't have a single guy on this roster still that I feel really great about that, even if Hartenstein is healthy. So I'm just worried about that. Like it just sort of feels like Jokic is a matchup nightmare, maybe the entire West bar. I mean, the Lakers and the Spurs, maybe.
No, I think you're right about that. I think the Thunder are going in the right direction with adding Hartenstein, and hopefully, I think he's only out for 5 or 6 weeks, so he should be,
Mhm.
fine by midseason or whatever. And then you still have Chet there, but yeah, I mean, like the size on that team is pretty tough. For me, with the Thunder, is a little bit of projection in that last year was like their first playoff run, so like they kind of got some of the jitters out of the way, and they still took, Dallas to a really tough series. But yeah, I mean the Denver Jokic and Murray pick and roll is still like the best play you can run at the end of games for, I don't know, any NBA team this year, right? So
Yeah.
there is something to that. But Shea was like really, really impressed me throughout the playoffs with the way he handled himself and the way he was just consistently able to get to his spots and score. And I think Shea does have that potential to be like a top five, top seven kind of player this year and lead a team pretty deep. So um, I think there's something to be said for Denver coming back a little bit fresher this season, but it made me nervous that they didn't. Their only real addition was Westbrook, and besides that, it's like I don't know when will the rest of the West kind of catch up to them in a sense.
Yeah. I mean, Dario Saric, that's not the
It's
stretch.
like, I like Saric has been one of those guys that like all these teams have added him, and it's like, wow, Dario Saric, like nice piece, and like he hasn't been a productive player for like 3 years.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Okay, yeah. So our one and two are swapped, but I feel like we're sort of on the same page there, sort of like pick your poison a bit. So this is where it starts getting actually not yet, but so I have Dallas three. I'd assume
Mhm.
there's three for you.
I had Minnesota 3 and then Dallas 4.
Whoa. Okay. We have a huge
Oh, you
okay.
dropped Minnesota, huh?
Oh, Minnesota. Where
Oh,
I
you're
wasn't even
kidding.
thinking of Minnesota at this point of
Okay.
my rankings. Um,
Okay. We can
I
go
have
with
Minnesota
Dallas.
13.
Wow. Dog, what? I had him 3.
Yeah, I'm just sort of out on I mean, let's start there. I mean,
Okay.
Minnesota 3, the Dallas Mavericks made the finals. What are we doing?
Yeah,
And
but
then
Dallas is
Minnesota
Dallas
traded
4.
away. Huh?
Okay, let's talk Minnesota. So why do you think they're going to drop off much? Because my take was going to be, is Nas Reed just taking those cat minutes really that big of a deal?
Yeah. I think the way I think of Minnesota, I'm just really worried about Gobert, and I don't think highly of Julius Randle. Maybe 13 was a bit ridiculous. Maybe I should have reconsidered. Um, Maybe 13's a bit low as I'm looking at my rankings now. They should be in like the 8 to 10 range, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. But I just don't love the combination of Julius Randle and Rudy Gobert as your front court. I also don't love the combination of Julius Randle and Anthony Edwards. I just am not a fan of Julius Randle in terms of winning basketball. 13 is probably too low. 13 is way too low. I'm gonna move them up. I'll figure out where, but they should be in like this 8 to 10 or 6 to 10 range at least.
But
Um,
okay, I mean, I hear what you're saying. Like, I honestly, when I look at Randall, I don't really look at him as like a central piece to this team. I think of it more as like, okay, it's pretty much the same team. You just take out Cat and you put in Nas Reed there into like the finishing lineups, which I think is what they'll end up finishing with because Randall's not
sure.
that much of a stretch guy. I also think DiVincenzo is like a huge, huge addition to this team. Um,
Interesting.
in addition to if you can get anything from Rob Dillingham, being able to have
Yeah.
those two like on-ball creators and scorers next to Ant, I think is big. Um, I think Ant is too good too to like really drop them down that low because I mean they were pretty close to making the finals last year with basically the same team. And I know Cat is a good player and everything, but I think we're gonna have a little bit of like, oh, how good was Cat and how important was Cat really to this team? Because he was fouling out of a lot of those games, and he'd still have those like stinker games in the playoffs too. Um,
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair. I
yeah,
don't
I
know.
don't think Julius Randle really factors into the bottom line for me too much. I feel like I don't know, maybe we're really too low on Randle, but I would almost just be like, just kind of like go away a little bit, or like, can we trade him for
Yeah,
something, or I don't know.
that's fair. Yeah, I guess if you, yeah. I guess if like Ant takes a step up, I'm just worried about. I just think the West is so deep. Sort of just worried about the roster construction. Yeah, 13's way too low. I'll walk that back. I'll walk back to 13.
But
I'll just
I really do believe in Ant. I think Ant is like, again, has the same potential as Shea. Is like could be a top five, top seven player, and I think he's too good at this point, and like too much of a motherfucker to really go too much lower, than when
it's
they went
fair.
last year. Like I'd be surprised if they like lost in the first round or something like that this year. I really think they'll have another deep run.
Yeah, I mean, I just have Dallas there because I think Luca is definitely in the conversation to be the best player in the NBA. Like definitely in the top three, regardless of how you feel about him. And he made the finals last year with PJ Washington as the problem is PJ Washington kind of still is his third best player. But I mean, I think it is really good. But if I'm to have to choose between two teams that are led by their best player, it's just going to be the team that has Luka Doncic. And I would just hope that someone on this roster steps up. Um, so yeah, that's sort of where I ended up with that. I sort of thought we got a good season from Kyrie too. Like, yeah,
Yeah, with Dallas, I still think this is a really good team. I don't think the Clay thing is going to be all that great for them. Honestly, I feel like Clay is kind of on the like it's probably done,
yeah,
kind of
it's
thing.
fair.
So I didn't really factor him into it too much. Outside of that, they still got some like decent depth and role players, but I still kind of do. I know they made the finals, but I still do kind of put a ceiling on Dallas in terms of just having Luka and Kyrie as your backcourt is really, really tough. Um, to make up for with the other defenders. And obviously Clay has lost a big step, defensively too. So, um, without that defensive identity, I just kind of put a ceiling on this team and figured they would be closer to where I had them as four, rather than like you know, all the like Thunder, Minnesota, and Denver all have that like number one option.
Yeah.
Granted, maybe might not be as good as Luka, save for Jokic, but those three teams also have a really nice defensive identity and are really good on both sides of the ball versus the Mavericks kind of lack in that aspect a little bit for me.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair way to think of it. Okay. All right, let's move on to maybe that was sort of three and sort of four. I mean, this is where it sort of gets really weird for I guess maybe the Minnesota thing's really weird, but I'm trying to walk that back a bit. I'll figure out where they fit in the end after all this. Um, but I have San Antonio in this next group.
I was gonna put them really up there. Yeah,
It's just I was thinking about it, right? Because the other teams in this group are like Phoenix, Memphis, Sacramento, maybe the LAs, I don't know, like the Rockets, depending on right. But if that's like the group I'm messing with, why not put the generational 7'7"? I mean, I'm in Paris. I'll put in Wembanyama,
yeah.
like no, but actually though, I sort of as I was like thinking about this take, I was the more I believed in it. Like he is a generational defender. He takes away entire halves of the court the way that like Richard Sherman did with the Legion of Boom in football. You watch him guard the pick and roll, he guards both positions, right? You can and what was the biggest problem last year was no one could throw an entry pass. And they didn't have a single point guard in. They bring in Chris Paul, super washed, of course. Who knows if he even plays half the season? But he's a guy that they just need the bare minimum from Chris Paul. Just a guy that can run the offense. Harrison Barnes is sneaky good pickup for them. Just a dependable veteran that can shoot the ball. And I like the Castle pick a lot. He sort of like the Castle Wembenyama pick and roll. Like they can switch that. They can stick with that. They got both guys who should lock down. Like this could be a defensive team. If Wembenyama takes a step up offensively, which he definitely should. If you watched the Olympics, he like is shooting half court threes, like pull up half court threes. Like he could win deep defensive player of the year this year and like be top five in MVP voting. And if that's the case, then that team's gonna be good. So fuck it, I'm all in on San Antonio.
So I had the Spurs. They ultimately ended up at 10 for me, but I started
Wow.
to think about them in like the 5 to 6 range just because of Wembanyama and because I think during the Olympics too, we really saw him like come into his own of like being the leader, number one scorer for a team that like really pushed Team USA at different points. Um, I do really like the Chris Paul. I do like Castle. I like that they're finally getting him some guards who like know what they're doing, and it's not going to be Sohan,
Yeah.
trying to run the point guard for him. And yeah, I mean, they still, I do like the Harrison Barnes and Keldon Johnson. Like it's starting to have the makings of a good team. And like you said, if you project a lot of improvement from Wembanyama this year, then I don't think it's crazy that they end up as like a 4 or 5 seed.
Right.
I'd actually be pretty surprised if they didn't make at least the play in this year. That's why I had
Yeah.
them at 10 is like I think they're solidly going to be in the playoffs or play in this year.
Yeah.
Um, but for me, I think this team is still a little too thin at different points of it to really truly like be a championship contender. Because obviously that's where you have them at 5 is like fifth most likely to win a championship,
Hey.
right? I think I still think too, there's probably a little bit of like it felt like last year the Spurs were holding him back a little
Yeah.
bit because they're like, hey, let's get another year, let's get another draft pick, like let's
Yeah.
not, accelerate this thing. So yeah, I think they're gonna still hold him back a little bit and kind of limit it. So that's why I had him more as like a solid in the playoff contention kind of team, but not in that upper echelon of the West because there's just too many good teams this year.
I mean, with these like truly generational talents like LeBron and MJ, and that's sort of it, right? Like, if Wembanyama is that, and Luca, to be honest, if is that sort of guy, like that timeline's always way faster than you think it is, right? Like, LeBron carried that god awful Cavs team. That Cavs team that he brought to the finals isn't any better than, or isn't any worse than this team that I'm looking at right now, right? So, I mean, it is really early about any of this stuff for him. Like I don't even think he's 21 yet. So, but yeah, I'm
But I
feeling
hear
the
you, and I got
pace.
excited about it too. I was like, how high can I put the Spurs?
100%. Yeah.
Who'd
Um,
you have after the Spurs?
so I think I'm gonna put Phoenix here, but you can. This is where you can start talking about Minnesota. For me, I guess I'd still probably have Phoenix over Minnesota. But yeah, I think I don't love that I have to put them here. They sort of remind me of like the 76ers of the West. Like, can't really put them lower than this because they have KD and Devin Booker, who are both top 20 NBA players at least. So like if you got two of those plus whatever you get out of Bradley Beal nowadays, like that's got to be at least a 5 or 6 seed. Um, but yeah, Valful, no, they can't make any real acquisitions. They don't have any picks. They don't have any mid-season moves that we can project. Like, seems like if anything, they'd blow it up after trading all their picks away. So I have them here, but I don't love it.
Yeah, I think I did like the Tyus Jones pickup for them. I thought that was pretty
Yeah.
nice. But yeah, like you said, I mean, the wings are still going to be kind of a problem. I think they paid Grayson Allen to basically be that guy, but having like Tyus Jones, Booker, and Beal as your like three, guards, I guess, and like one of them is going to start at small forward, basically. I think the defense isn't great there. You
Yeah.
can kind of book down Booker, Durant, and Beal to all miss like what, 20 games each.
Easy.
Um,
Easy.
but they still have like one of the higher ceilings in the West for sure. Like there still is a
Yeah.
world where like everything clicks really well and Nurkic isn't a disaster and they could still make a pretty deep run in the West. So yeah, I had them 5.
Yeah.
Um, but like you were saying, there is something about this team that still leaves me a little bit cold.
Yeah.
Although you could make a case that like last year was a little bit of like the year from hell, right? Because Beal comes in
Right.
the middle of the year, they just have no chance to make any solid acquisitions around the team, and everyone's still kind of like thrown together for this first year. So I think they'll. I don't take them super super seriously as a championship contender, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're there towards the end of the West playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, just too talented. But that's what happens when you trade all your picks away, right? Like if you're not a top 5 team, then what the hell happened?
And I
Um,
think too, like I know that they basically traded nothing for Beal, but that still feels like one where it's like, you probably didn't need Beal and you'd rather just like
yeah,
have those assets to like fill in the roster outside of Durant and Booker because that's enough scoring. And
right,
after that, you kind of just need more defense and role players than whatever
right.
Beal gives you at this point.
I mean, they still don't really have a point guard. Like it's still Devin Booker as the point guard, basically.
And Tyus Jones,
Tyus
it's like
Jones, yeah,
a high end backup. Like if you use your
yeah,
backup, you'd be like, that's sick. And if it's your starter, you're like, it leaves me a little cold.
right, exactly. So, but yeah, definitely in that spot there. And then after that, I have Memphis. So yeah, this is where like they're all sort of the same. A lot of injury luck's going to play in here, right? Like who can stay healthy is going to make a huge impact for me. I mean, Memphis, what I sort of like about Memphis is they sort of got um like a year off from Ja. Like Ja just kind of got to not get hurt. I guess he like I don't know, it was weird. Like but he sort of like got to stay healthy in the off season and not have to worry about all this stuff and like hopefully like get his mind right and like get focused on basketball. I think the roster's still really deep. I think they're extremely well coached. Like Jaren Jackson a lot. The Zach Edey pick is whatever, but still kind of like could be exciting, like gives them another dimension to their offense. Marcus Smart, like they have sort of the makings of a really good defensive team too between Smart and Jaren Jackson. And yeah, like they're just really well rounded. And if Ja is good, there's no reason why they can't be this good or better, to be honest.
Yeah, so after the Suns, I had the Kings, and then I had
Yeah.
Memphis.
Yeah,
So I
I
had
had that
Memphis coming
flipped.
in at 7.
Yeah.
But yeah, I echo a lot of the same points here. It does make me nervous a little bit how much time off Ja has had now, because I feel like it's been basically the better part of 2 seasons that he's kind of missed.
Yeah.
But yeah, I still think Smart is like a really important piece for this team. Obviously, you still have Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. The Edey pickup, part of me makes me nervous because it's just another big body when, Ja's trying to drive in and do all this crazy stuff. But on the other side, I saw Ja like throw a lob to Edey where like Edey got like 2 inches off the ground and dunk it. And I'm like, well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But still, like you can still at the end of games, swap Jaren Jackson Jr. in and then still go 5 out and have a pretty good team.
Yeah.
It's just a difficult team to project because we haven't seen Ja for that long. And when you're out of the game for that long, like Ja's too talented for him to not be good. But, 1 season, whatever, 2 seasons now makes me kind of nervous about, what kind of like how he just kind of adjusts and brings it back into the game.
Yeah. That's fair. Yeah. But yeah, it should be exciting. Yeah, I have Sacramento right beneath them, so we have that flipped. I mean, Sacramento is sort of like the actual picture of consistency. I mean, to me, like all of these teams are sort of the same. Like between Phoenix and I'll put Minnesota in here now. Like I guess I'd have Minnesota 8 right behind. Um, yeah, like they all feel similar to me. It's like injury luck and who is developing well. I like the floor of Sacramento. Like, I don't think they can be much worse than this unless Sabonis and Fox got hurt. But it just, they lack top end. Like, what are we doing? Right? Like, adding DeMar DeRozan, cool, fun, like, should make your end of game. But it's not like their end of game lineup was bad. Like, I think De'Aaron Fox was like top 5 in fourth quarter scoring on the up. Um, and then but there's no one that like could be the best player in a playoff series, really. So if that's the case, then we're talking about a like Celtic situation where okay, we have no one that's the best player, but we have 5 guys that are in the top 7 of the series, which I don't think they have. So
Yeah, I think the reason I put the Kings down here is because like you were talking about, they don't have as high of a ceiling as some of the other contenders, especially with who the other guys, the 5 teams I had in front of them, their best players. I do think DeRozan will be nice for end of game situations just to give him another on-ball creator because it was a lot on Monk. And we, see some of Sabonis's limitations in the playoffs and towards the end of game kind of situations. Um, so yeah, I like the depth. I like the continuity. I like being able to basically swap out Barnes for DeRozan. I think that's a pretty big move. But like you said, I don't see the kind of high end ceiling. Like I'd be pretty surprised if they, ended up in the finals or something like that. And that kind of goes for all the teams that are now below them on this list.
Yeah.
I really see it as like Thunder, Minnesota, Denver, Mavericks. Like, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see any of those teams in the finals. And then everyone else, I'd be like, oh, okay. Like, good for you.
Right. Yeah. 100%. I agree with that 100%. What do you have next after Sacramento?
After Sacramento, I had Memphis, and then the next team that we haven't talked about yet, I had at 8 was the Lakers.
Okay. All right. So to me, this is sort of like a second, I guess this third tier. Like I have the Rockets, but if I could be talked into the Lakers, I just am waiting for this LeBron slower regression. I feel like we've sort of seen it. I think more so, maybe not in his play, but in the games that he can play. Like even just getting like how many good LeBron games are we going to get in a year? Maybe 10, maybe 20. And then out of those 20, like how many games is he actually playing in the season? Like 60 at most, right? Like he's not really playing more than that. So if we're only getting like 10 out of 82 real good LeBron games, like how good is their ceiling really? Um, but yeah, I don't know. AD was really healthy last year. I don't know if they can replicate that. It feels like LeBron's just out here trying to play with his son, and we'll get some brawny, brawny moments in like blowout games against the Celtics, and then that'll be sort of what this season is about.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the great thing about LeBron is he also has a really high floor. So even in the games
Yeah,
where you're not getting like the full LeBron controlling everything, whatever, he's still giving you 27, 7, and 7, and like you don't have to worry about it too much. That's a really good point about AD was like unnaturally healthy last year.
yeah,
We'll see if he turned a corner, if that's something that's real.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, outside of that, they're just running the whole team back. So maybe
Right.
you look at a little bit of improvement from Reeves. I still don't love D'Lo being on
Yeah.
this team or Hashimura.
Like
But
Dalton
yeah, I think
Connect.
it does feel like a kind of unserious team in a sense of like
Yeah.
they haven't really been trying to push the championship envelope, but it seems like they're more okay with like it being kind of the LeBron show for the last, couple years here. But out of respect to LeBron and AD and what those guys do every year, I don't think I could put them much lower than 8. But I think again, there's probably not a solid playoff team, more of like a play-in, maybe they get frisky and win a couple games in round one kind of team, which is what they've been for the last few years.
Yeah, I think I have them 11. So, and that might be too low, but I mean, I have the Rockets 8, and I just think that they have a much higher ceiling and maybe not that lower of floor. Um, they're sort of like how I feel about the Thunder, just worse in every position. They would match up with the Thunder, but because they still don't really have a top end guy. Like it, I guess it's Şengün, which is funny because I think they traded, yeah, the draft rate to Şengün. I mean, OKC drafted Şengün and they traded the Rockets, which is crazy.
Oh wow.
Because imagine if they had Şengün. But yeah, like Şengün would really need to take a huge step up for them to be much higher than 8 for me. Jalen Green's fine. I don't know. It sort of seems like we know what he is. A lot of like the same kind of guys, like Cam Whitmore. Who else? Oh, like these like Reed Shepard is a nice pickup, but yeah, like I don't know, Van Vliet, like they just don't have a real star, and it seems like a lot to ask Şengün to be this guy. Um, but they're deep and they're athletic and they're nice and young, and they lost Steven Adams for the whole year last year, which is definitely a big loss. But having Adams and Brooks and then Amin Thompson, like that should be a good defensive core. So yeah, I don't know. I think 8 makes sense.
I had them lower. I had them at 13 because I was just looking
Wow.
at through all the teams and I'm like, okay, someone's got to be towards the bottom of the conference. Just in terms of like championship equity, like I would put them pretty low down there for me.
Sure.
In terms of regular season record, like they could definitely be above 13. And I think a lot of these lower tier teams, like everyone's going to kind of end up around like 30, 40 wins because just the conference is so tough.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. This team leaves me a little bit cold. Even though you said like
Interesting.
Şengün could take a step up, when Şengün was out last season, they kind of played better because they were able to
Yeah.
kind of like spread the floor a little bit, not have to run such like a post up, play through the big man kind of offense. Jabari Smith, I'm pretty much ready to be done saying that like he could be a top tier guy.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, for sure.
Same with Jalen Green too. I think he's more of just like a kind of like fun scorer than he is like the next Devin Booker or something like that. So I just like, yeah, great depth. Nice that they have some continuity and that they're getting Adams back and everything, but I just don't really see the upside with this team, and I think someone's gonna have to lose in this conference, even though they're a tough team to play every night.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. They're a young team. They're gonna want to win. Like we said off top, like it's so deep in this conference. I think a lot of it will come down to like desire and health. And I'd sort of just rather bet on the young guys wanting it more than like I have the Clippers at I guess now at 13 because I moved Minnesota up. So like a team like that, I'm just like I'm done. Like who knows if Kawhi will even play, and if he doesn't play, like I'm out. So yeah.
So after the Lakers at nine, or the Lakers were eight for me, and then I had the Warriors at nine. Where'd you end up with the Warriors?
Okay. Okay. So I have the Lakers 11 and the Warriors 12 with my revised rankings now. I have in he goes Rockets at 9, Pelicans at 10, then Lakers, then Golden State. But they're all similar. I just decided to
Yeah,
go with the youth here. I mean, yeah, Warriors, sure. It just is
that's
like
what I thought too. It
it's
left me a
like
little cold looking at the roster. I'm like, it seems like it's missing something.
yeah, and it's like they were a 10 seed last year when I felt like their roster was better. Like
Yeah.
and now like what am I supposed to do with this? Like I'm supposed to hope Pozemski is really good? I don't know. Kaminga said in an interview that he's on a Kawhi Leonard career
I saw
trajectory. It's like
that.
that is a crazy thing to say about yourself. Like sort of that makes me out on you. I like won a Finals MVP at your age. Like I don't know what you're talking about. Like also Kawhi's been hurt. Like I don't want to be on his career trajectory. So yeah, I don't know. Feeling I've honestly they could talk me into lower. Like Steph misses a month and this team is done.
I'm with you on that. I had them at nine, but I could see this being a team that really takes a step back this year. I mean, they still
Yeah.
have good NBA players all around. People are really hyping up the Buddy Hield addition.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to remind everyone, like, Buddy Hield hasn't really been good in like 2 years. Like, let's relax on all that.
Yeah. If not
Oh, this
longer.
the Splash Brothers 2.0. It's like, no, that's not right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think last year, I think things were weird with Clay because everyone kind of knew he was done and that like the franchise had chosen, Draymond and some of the young guys and basically Wiggins over him.
Yeah.
Wiggins has been a corpse of himself ever since those finals. Draymond
Yeah.
is still like a liability on both ends,
Yeah.
but like,
Yeah.
basically any night you put him out there. I do really like Jackson Davis a lot, though. I think that's a nice pickup. And Podemski, and they finally paid Moody, so they'll finally give him not finally paid Moody, but they're finally going to play Moody. Um,
Yeah.
so I think there's some potential here for some of the young guys to really take over, but it kind of just feels like they're leaving Steph out to dry here a little bit with not too much ball creation outside of him. So it's going to be a lot on Kuminga to take a step up, and I'm not sure he really has that much
Yeah. I mean, it just
there.
feels like with the Lakers and the Warriors, it's just two franchises given their superstars. Like, let them get the stats. Let Steph break every record. Let's just let him take 30 shots a game if he wants it. And then we'll wait the 2 to 3 years and then they'll be done. And then we can actually So if that's like the franchise's attitude, which is what I'm projecting, then I'm just like, okay, then I don't think they're serious about winning. Because if they were, I feel like, there'd be different moves being made.
Yeah, it's such a bummer too because Steph and LeBron are still really good. They're just not good enough to be like the only guys on their team. But with like how expensive their contract is and like the new salary cap rules, like you don't really have space for other people. Like, basically like the what would be like the second star is like taken up by the Wiggins and Draymond contract. And you're like, well, that
Right,
doesn't sound good. Like for LeBron,
right.
it's like just the AD contract, who's still really good, but like you basically book him down for 60 games every year and then cross your fingers after that. So yeah, sad state for the Warriors. And I could see them regressing a lot this year. Like you said, if Steph misses 2 months, like this could be a bottom three team in the West.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And that's why ultimately I had the Pelicans ahead of them. But, we're talking about the 9 seed here. Like, who knows with the Pelicans? Yeah. So a team I have, in this same group, just ahead of Lakers and Golden State, is the Pelicans. Sort of feel like I've been out on them for a while, but this is pretty low. This is 10. So I'm just saying there'll be a play-in team. I mean, they're also extremely deep. They have, I mean, Zion and CJ still. They traded for DeJounte Murray last year. So it's exciting in some ways. Like Trey Murphy, I think, is hurt, but did just sign an extension. Feels like still that they've got too many of the same kind of player between BI and Trey Murphy and Zion. They sort of like and Herb Jones like sort of occupy the same space in the court, but still too talented for me. And have never been there, so want to be there, which I think is a factor.
Yeah, Pelicans, I had them at 11, and I was trying to figure out if I could put them any higher, and I don't know why, but I just didn't want to. Even though I think the DeJounte Murray deal was like a pretty good trade for them.
Mhm.
So I think CJ was a little bit overtaxed as like the lead ball handler on this team. And like you said, they still have a lot of great depth, like Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, and Jordan Hawkins, and Alvarado coming off the bench. I
Yeah.
did get a little nervous that I think they're going to start Tice at center, as in Daniel Tice, which is a little wild.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that made me nervous too is like the Brandon Ingram contract stuff. It was pretty open that they were trying to trade him all summer and then they couldn't get an extension done. So it seems like they're kind of over him. CJ's another year older, but Zion looks like he's in shape. So that'd be
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. They have like if Zion is ever as good as we thought he was going to be, this could be the year, like this, they could shoot up these rankings if things work out. It's never been the year for them. So I'm not going to start betting on it now.
Yeah, it's a bummer too. Like if you go back and look, like watch like early Zion, like at Duke or like his rookie year, and just look at how
Right.
fast he moves versus
Yeah.
how he's moving now. It's like it looks like a completely different guy. He's still very good, but the way he was just like exploding through defenders and stuff, it's like it's not there anymore. And I don't know if you can even get that back after this many years, Not that he's an old guy or anything, but
Right. No, I hear
just
you're
the
saying.
way we were talking about him like 4 years ago versus like what he is now. Like, I don't know, it's just kind of a bummer.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, he was supposed to be the guy. So yeah, we're losing that. But you know,
I
who
can't really
knows?
see them as more than like a play-in low end of the playoffs team, right? Like it
Yeah,
would
if they
take something
made this
crazy for them to break into the top six.
yeah, I was gonna say if they made the top six, either there's a bunch of injuries or Zion is in the MVP conversation, both of which seem unlikely.
It also just seems like a case of kind of roster mismanagement a little bit. Like,
Right.
they basically like Dyson Daniels, I feel like we all liked him a lot a couple of years ago. Now he's just gone. Like Hawkins hasn't really gotten a ton of play. Trey Murphy and Herb Jones kind of get held back too, just because they have such a jam at that position. So I don't know. I feel like every year they kind of like a little bit more talent kind of trickles out and they kind of stay the same and just a bummer of a team. I feel like they had so much
Yeah.
more potential, but well.
Yeah. Okay. So the team I have beneath them, well, I guess for me, it's I have Rockets 9, Pelicans 10, Lakers 11, Warriors 12, and then I have Clippers 13. And this is a team that honestly has the potential to be the worst team in the West, I think, if the injuries don't play in their way. So they lost Paul George in free agency this year. Not a trade. They just straight up lost him. So they don't replace him with anybody, which is a big loss. He was definitely a top 20 NBA player last year. I think he made the NBA third team, right? So you're just sort of missing that void. Kawhi's already hurt. I don't think he's played more than like 60 games in like 5 years, something like that. So what is this really like? This is like a James Harden led team. Like I'm thinking that like Mo Bamba might start, or I guess Zubats is in that spot, but like Derrick Jones Jr., like you just look at this roster and it's awful. It's a terrible team. It's like Norm Powell is their best scorer, bar Kawhi. So yeah, it's really bleak for LA.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised. I had them at 12. I'm a little surprised we both agreed that they would be this low, but it kind of seems like that's what it is. The Kawhi thing
Yeah,
has been a bummer for 5 years, and now it's just like I don't expect him to be available at all. You
yeah,
know, he hasn't really been in the playoffs in a while either. I still do like Zubats, but I don't know the jam up at guard. I mean, they have Harden, Bones Highland, Kevin Porter Jr., which why is he on this team? Trey Mann, Norman Powell, and then Chris Dunn, all trying to compete for minutes at guard. Like, I don't
yeah,
know, there's just a lot of guards that all leave me kind of empty.
yeah,
Um, they still have Batum and PJ Tucker on this team, even though I know they told Tucker to go away.
yeah,
So yeah, once if Kawhi is missing a lot of time and Harden's another year older, like the outlook is pretty bleak for this. Um, it's hard to put them much lower because they're moving into the new building, and I'm sure Ballmer will try and make another big move or something to try and keep people watching this team and keep them, from becoming irrelevant. But there's just not a ton to be excited about. And that was just and now I think now the picks that they traded for Paul George are all kind of kicking in now. So there's not a ton of I don't know, good things coming in the future. Although it's
no,
LA,
yeah.
so you never know if someone wants to come play in the
I mean,
city and whatnot. But
The Thunder definitely have a world in which they can win the championship this year and also get the first pick
yeah, yeah.
in the draft. So that's pretty insane.
Sad, sad team. It's a sad
Yeah,
team this year.
yeah. Okay. And then the last two teams in the West, I'm sure we agree here. I have Utah over Portland. I don't think it really matters. Um, I'm assuming you have the same.
I have the same, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Markkinen survives this or ends the season as a Utah Jazz player, but yeah, I don't know. Not much to talk
Uh,
about. Both rosters are pretty awful and don't want to
yeah,
win. Seems like a red
yeah.
flag.
I think it makes sense for Utah, especially with the way that Danny Ainge goes about building his team, that it doesn't make sense for them to be good this year.
Yeah,
'Cause, what is the upside there? Like there's just so many good teams in the West that it makes sense to kind of bottom out for another year, which is basically what they did at the end of last season. They kind of
yeah,
just started playing random guys and going with it. I disagree on Markkinen. I think they'll keep him around. He's just too young and too good. Um, unless someone really comes by and blows them away with an offer. But if you trade Markkinen, then what else are you excited about on this team? Like I guess Walker Kessler and Keontae George. It's not a ton here. I mean, I think they still have NBA players. I do still like Will Hardy a lot as a coach. I think because of that, they overachieve a little bit
yeah,
every year. So it
yeah.
wouldn't surprise me if they still end up with like 30-ish, 35 wins. But at that point, that still seems like the second worst team in the West, which is what I have them as.
Yeah, and then Portland. I mean, we really don't need to waste time with Portland because this roster is god awful. Scoot was
There are a
awful
lot of
until the
guys I
end of
like,
last year.
but
Yeah, I mean, Tybal, I'll never quit. I just love him. But I think in the offseason, their head coach, Chauncey Billups, which is also insane, said that Denny Avdia was the best player in camp and the best
Oh,
player on the roster. So,
I actually believe that. I like Denny.
you know,
I kind of bummed out that Denny ended up on this team because like there's just not enough ball to go around with Scoot Simons and Sharp and then Denny, Ayton, and Grant who all need touches too. It's just like it's a little too
yeah.
much. Everyone's like offense first and no one's really defense on this team.
Yeah, it seems like we're not gonna one of those three guards is done by the end of the season, it feels like. And feel like he will be on the Spurs or on the Hornets or some or the Pelicans or something for like a couple seconds in the trade deadline. Like that's the sort of just given like the size of his contract, sort of the vibe I'm getting.
So
So
young guy, but Scoot, are you kind of like I'm I really took down what I thought Scoot could be, and now I'm just wondering if he's going to be like what Westbrook is right now, just for like the rest of it. You know what I mean? Just like a kind of
yeah,
energy guard who's like more suited to be like your third guard, but then in the playoffs, you're like, I don't know if we really
I
want to
still
play him all that
think
much. I don't know.
he's got the highest upside of the three. I'm really out on Shannon Sharp. I really don't know what he
Yeah, well,
does. Um, Simons feels like the lowest ceiling, but he's the only one that's shown that he can actually play. So I don't know. I feel sort of the same. I mean, yeah, I feel like Scoot. I still see something in Scoot. Like I could if he played well this, but this would have to be the year. Like if he's not playing well this year, then I'm done. It's over. So
I still like Sharp, but I think of him more in the same category as like a Jalen Green or a Cam Thomas of like
interesting. See, I don't even.
this guy could score like 25, but like it would be very inefficient and you'd have all the highlights, but you'd be like, is this really helping us win or is this kind of cool, just cool to watch?
No, I'm not even there with him. I think he's like I don't know. He's like Norm Powell to me.
Or Pal. I put him around the same category as those
Yeah,
guys.
yeah. So yeah, yeah,
I hope Rob
exciting.
Williams gets healthy too.
Yeah,
That
and
that
Klingon,
also
the
seems like
UConn
one.
guy, he'll
And
be fun.
Klingon, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a lot of guys in this team. And I don't is Billups still the coach? I really don't
yeah.
like him
Belps
as a
is
coach.
no, I think he's maybe a terrible coach, but it's okay.
Not
They
a good
want to,
guy either. Not a good guy.
yeah, just all around maybe bad. Yeah. So, do you want to talk about our finals picks?
Yeah, I've got Celtics over the Nuggets.
Okay.
Like we talked about in the East, I think it's the Celtics championship to lose as long as everyone stays healthy. Um, I do think Denver gets back there, even though to me they're not necessarily the best team in the West. But I still think the Thunder have another year of like really getting close to it. And yeah, I just think the Denver pedigree, like, you know, Denver also really gets squeezed with contracts starting next year, um,
Yeah.
between their top guys. So I think Denver gets there one more time, but I think the Celtics are able to pull this one out.
Yeah. I have the same matchup, but I couldn't give it to you. Couldn't repeat it. So I have Nuggets over
Okay.
Denver.
Yeah.
Um, I think if Jokic is the kind of player I think he is, and that the kind of player that he's shown, this is the kind of finals that you would win, right? Like this is cementing a top 10 of all time player sort of status would be to win this. Because I definitely think the roster is worse. But like you said, he knows just as well as we do that this is sort of like the end of a window, right? Whereas with Tatum and Brown, like sure they're going to lose some pieces, but they're still young and growing. So it feels like maybe it's more desperation on their end, and and it's just so hard to repeat. So I'd have Denver over Celtics.
Yeah, totally. I'm with you there. And yeah, like you said, I think what'll be interesting is both of those teams will kind of have to at least ship out one or two pieces.
Yeah,
If it doesn't, even if it does happen this year, just the money crunch, especially the Denver owners have been kind of weird about spending money and going like deep into the luxury tax,
right.
which you kind of need to do there. But yeah, those games were super competitive during the regular season. They felt like playoff games, and I believe Denver won both matchups because Murray and Jokic just kind of went insane.
Yeah.
And I think their end of game scoring gives the Celtics a lot of issues. So I
Yeah.
don't hate that pick for you.
It's fair. Then who do you have for MVP?
I think it's the Luka year. I think it's the Luka year.
Yep, I
Um,
agree. I agree.
there's not
Gotta
a
be.
ton. I think it'd be really tough for Jokic to win another one.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe
he's
Tatum would, if Tatum took another step, this would also be a good Tatum year.
I think Tatum had like I think Embiid, Jokic, maybe even like Luca, like all those guys would have to get hurt for Tatum to be a serious candidate, especially with just like the way like the media just kind of paints him now. Like Tatum would have to take a big step up, and some of the top guys would have to get hurt. Like even Shea was ahead of him in the voting
Yeah,
for me.
Shea's another guy that could definitely get it for sure. I don't see Embiid, like the media's on Embiid. Embiid said he's not playing back to back, so he's going to be disqualified from that anyway. So just like who can play, what's it, 65 games and be good? It's not a long list of players. So yeah, I think Luca, Shea, Tatum are on my list. Sneaky Wemby,
Ant,
like
I was gonna say Ant.
Ant for sure.
I mean, if Wemby actually like is in the conversation for it this year, like everyone's just fucked for the next like 15
Yeah,
years,
no,
you
for
know?
sure.
Like no one
Yeah.
else will win MVP if he wins it this year. Like just forget it.
Yeah. But it has to be Luca because he hasn't gotten one yet.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's got to be Luca. If it's not Luca, I don't know who.
That's anything else you want to chat about NBA wise?
About where we ended up here.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I feel good about where we ended up here. So,
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's gonna be an interesting season, man. The West is really tough. The East is really tough. There's just not a lot of teams that are trying to lose this year. I
yeah.
mean, excited to get back
Yeah.
into NBA basketball.
Yeah, I'm starting tomorrow. So, all right. Well, um, thanks for listening.